I'll tell you a story. Once upon a time, there were two friends who had not seen each other in years. And they decided to meet up and catch up on the good times and everything has happened in their lives. Their lives have kind of gone in their own ways, and they felt bad that they were involved in each other's lives. Now, one of them had become an avid traveler over the years. And he visited a lot of exotic places, seen a lot of sights, many cities. He experienced many foreign cultures all across the continents. So he had a lot to share. And so this friend who was a traveler, he invited the other friend to his house, and he was very excited and very eager to share about all of the travels that he's done, all the exciting things that he's seen just with his buddy, because that's what friends do. We share in each other's joys and happiness and experiences. He wanted to explain everything that he's learned and understood from his travels. So he invited his friend to come over, and he did. And so when they got together, the friend who was a traveler brought out a special box of keepsakes. That's where he kept his treasures from the travels. And he laid out all those treasures on the table. And what it was is a bunch of coins from all these different countries he visited, some paper bills, some ticket stubs to the different things that he went to, the trains he rode, the planes he flew, all of these different memories, essentially, that he has collected on all of these adventures. And he was a very disciplined kind. He realized that if he collected everything about that he has done in all these past years, he would have this massive trunk of things. So he said, I'm going to keep 250 of very small mementos, just little things, coins, bills, ticket stubs, things like that. So, and that's what he laid out on the table. And as he was telling his stories and showcasing all of his treasures, suddenly a gust of autumn wind came out of the window, and it blew on those items, and the items blew across the table and across the room and onto the balcony and off the balcony and into the backyard. So, of course, the friends jumped to action. They shut the windows, shut the doors, shut the balcony door, went outside, rummaging through the autumn leaves to find those special keepsakes, those mementos that all these stories are connected to. And so they gathered and they worked really hard. And finally, when they got back to the house, they picked up everything off the floor and all the things they found. They started counting them. And they counted, and they counted, and they did not come to the 250 number. Some things were inevitably lost in this shuffle. And then they sat down and realized that it's dark outside and they can't go out looking anymore. Those things are just gone. They're lost. But the memories behind them remained. What those things represented were all those travels and all those memories and all those experiences. So sometimes we number things and we hold them precious, but what they really are there is to remind us of something else. So this fourth section of the Torah, okay, Bamidbar, we're reading, it begins and it lists all the names. We start going through all the names of Israelites. We're counting them, right? It's a census. And that is why the book is traditionally called Numbers, because it begins with all these numbers, okay? And then some people find numbers exciting. I have met people like that. A lot of people find numbers incredibly boring, and it's understandable why people are not enjoying to read the very beginning of the book of Numbers. If anybody's been reading Torah with excitement at this point, it kind of drops down. But I have to say, these things are there for a reason. These names are there for a memory. Hashem did not want us to forget these facts. He did not want us to forget those names. And those names were inscribed in the Holy Torah for all these generations. These are family members whose memory needs to go on. So yes, all these names and numbers that seem boring to us, they're actually meaningful. And so what spiritual truths can I bring out from a long list of names and numbers? I have a few things to offer you this morning. I have 3 points, actually, that I wanted to make. And my first point is this. Counting counts. In fact, that's the name of my drash. Counting counts. Even today, when we take a census, we don't just take a census to count people randomly. We do it for a reason, right? We have a purpose why we decide to count people. And so in Israel, at that time, The reason why they were counting all these people is because they needed to know how big was their army. They were preparing for a battle. If you know the book of Numbers, they're going to encounter some adversaries in the desert. They don't know this yet, but Amalek will attack. And so, yes, they are counting to determine the strength of their fighting army, the number of their able-bodied men, defenders, warriors. That's what the count really is all about. And so if you think in the big picture, the reason why we count anything, it is because we want to know. We want to be aware. We want to keep track of whatever it is that we're counting. So right now, we're still counting the Omer, right? Why are we doing that? For the same exact reason, to keep track and to bring us to a certain awareness. The practice of counting of the Omer teaches us valuable lessons. By counting of the Omer, we today recognize that time is sacred, for example. That's why we count it. It's sacred. And the fact that it is in God's hands. Every time I count the Omer, that's one of the awareness that I have. You know, God is the one who runs the clock. I don't. And then the days that progress, they progress with or without me. If I neglect the counting, guess what? They will still pass. My counting does not affect all that's happening. And it's humbling. And as I count the Omer, I'm just reminded of these things. Now, I say the counting counts, and this is what I mean. It helps us to take stock of reality. That's what counting is about. So numbers continue to serve very good purpose for us in our lives. If you think about it, sometimes we need to count. But then there are times in our lives when we do not need to count. We need to count when God tells us to do so, but not every single time. There are some instances where we should stop counting. Why? Let me remind you of something else. I believe that, and this is my point number 2, is that numbers are not everything. Verse 46 in our chapter, as we read, we begin with all these names and numbers, and finally we get to verse 46, and it has a tally. Okay, there's that bottom line. And the bottom line is verse 46. It says there were 650,550 men over the age of 20 who were ready to fight, essentially. That was the result of the census. That it took us 46 verses to get there. Okay? So, the question is, was that enough? 650,000 people, and then some, to fight the 7 nations of Canaan. Is that enough? So we counted. Okay, this is the size of our army. Is that going to do it? Just think about of what's ahead. Ahead is a whole country filled with people who are going to be defending their homes. You know, all those Amorites, Jebusites, Perizzites, all the ites, right, that you read about in the Bible. I mean, I joke about it. You know, these were real people, but God decided to wipe them out. So as we think about numbers in this way, as we think about the strength of numbers, we realize that there's a great strength in numbers. Majority rules, right? If anything we have learned in our life is that majority tends to swing things in the way the majority wants to swing things. So that simple realization of majority rules makes us recognize that numbers are important and there's strength in numbers. And when we don't have strength in numbers, we become discouraged. We all of a sudden feel that I am not on a winning side. I am in the minority. When we don't have the numbers, we become discouraged. I'm thinking right now of Eliyahu, okay, Elijah the prophet. Remember how he looked around and he said, Lord, I am the only one left of the prophets. If they kill me, this is it. There's no one else left. Everyone has bowed their knee to Baal. You kill me, you allow me to die, God, There's no one else left. He was so discouraged. He was so depressed. The fact is this, he looked around, he did not see people stand up like he did against idolatry in Israel that day. Of course, that wasn't true. Remember the Lord's answer to him. But that is how he felt, because he did not see the strength in numbers. He felt very much alone. Now think about another character in the Tanakh that we read about is Gideon. Gideon, he also believed in numbers, and he hoped that he would have a large enough army to defeat the enemies of Israel. And then when he finally gathered all these men, what did the Lord do to him? He thinned out the ranks of his army. Now, why would you do that? If numbers are strength, if there's strength in numbers, why would you do that? Well, the truth is, and the moral of that story is that when the Lord is in the midst of his people, when God's Spirit is upon them, numbers, well, they're not everything. It's not all about numbers. So on one side, we learn these lessons that numbers represent strength. But on the other side, we realize that that's not always the case. So we're used to numbering, and that's why we think sometimes of ourselves amidst of others as one of those numbers. So that brings me to my point number 3. You are more than a number. At times, you and I, we feel small. We feel like we don't matter. We're just a number. We are a statistic. We're one of many in this vast crowd of others who are way more remarkable than we are. You ever feel that way? Sometimes we feel that way. We're counted, we're numbered many times, and each one of us yet stands unique in front of God, because you are so much more than a number. In God's eyes, even the number of 1 is significant. I want to use an example of minyan. We need 10 to represent the community. There's a famous Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He said this brilliant saying that sometimes I like repeating. He says, it takes 9 holy, learned, and exceedingly devout chassids together to pray, and only 1 ordinary, simple Jew to complete the minyan so they can all sanctify God's name together. If you think you're not important, realize that you may feel alone, but together, as we come, we actually mean something. So minyan teaches us this lesson. But 1 is significant. It only takes 1 person to complete it. And if you are short just 1 person, there are many prayers that we cannot say. So as Jews who follow Yeshua's teachings, no doubt you realize that we are a minority. Sometimes we feel like a small, tiny minority. And we have been few in number for many generations. But we have always been there. Hashem has always preserved us for all these ages. And as we look at these small numbers, you should not ever underestimate them. Because all it took was 12 Jewish guys, and they turned this entire world upside down with the teachings of the Messiah. We stand over here and we recite the teachings of our Messiah. It is these words that has transformed countries and kingdoms and kings, turned people who worship nothingness into believers in one God. That's amazing. That's just 12 guys saying, that's enough. We could do this. So don't ever minimize numbers. They're just the witnesses of his resurrection, and so are we today. Now, you are more than a number. And so stand and be counted, because together we actually make a big impact. Hashem's hand is upon you.